Well, that's another loss for UCF. They lose to West Virginia 31-21. We're going to do our best to break it down. But at the end of the day, it's the same problems. It's the same things that keep happening. So I really don't know how this episode's going to go. We're going to talk about it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Don't know if I mentioned the score, 31-21. Lost to West Virginia. Obviously not my normal setup. So this is usually my setup for our watch-alongs, which we just got done with. And I decided I'm lazy. I decided I don't want to go to my podcast setup. I just want to sit here, get this over with, get this done with, and go from here. So this is the setup. It's not too bad. You get a nice blue light behind me. Nick, you were on for a good half of the live watch-along. You know, it's gotten old. It really has. I mean, we actually, before I said, what are we going to talk about? Because this game, I don't know if the energy or the vibe has just gotten so bad where nobody cares anymore. But it just seems like that was as bad of a performance as you could have for UCF, and it just seems like numb. Is that wrong to say?
No, that's about how I feel. Like, the game was the game. I mean, listen, and in many ways, Sean, I felt like this was the most discouraging one yet. I'd have to go back and honestly review all of them. Maybe the Colorado game because of the hype, but to me, this was the most discouraging one because, you know, you're fighting for bowl eligibility to keep that alive. You're coming off a bye week. You're playing a West Virginia team, which is very comparable to you. And really, the entire way, it was West Virginia was a better football team. I mean, and it was in every phase. Like, at no point, you know, UCF got behind 7-0 and 14-0 early, and then obviously when I joined in, it was 21-7. It just at no point did it feel like UCF had any juice in them to try to claw their way back into that football game. It felt so like insurmountable, and I just can't believe we've gotten to that point where, you know, a 14-point lead with a whole half to play feels insurmountable. But with this team right now, it really does. And like I said, that's what I'm saying. The game was just the game. It's like, I don't think we're really focusing on the X's and O's and why things happened. Like, you know, there wasn't like plays out there. Like, if they made this one play, they win the game. Like, it just wasn't one of those deals today, as was the case in some of the other losses. So this to me was just, it's capped what has been a completely just failure of a season, given the bigger expectations that we had for this team, that the coaching staff had for this team, and I'm sure the players themselves had for this team. It's just all around right now. It's just everything's in a funk, and you know, the fact that we sit here today and they've lost 7 of 8 games is just, I mean, I would have never seen that coming. I never would have seen that coming. Like, with all of the chaos in this conference, Sean, where it truly feels like anybody can beat anybody on any given week, and it happens routinely. It happened today, by the way. It doesn't apply to UCF. It doesn't apply to them because the only game they've won, you know, since the TCU game was against Arizona, which just was a team that's worse than them, clearly. Like, they couldn't even like luck their way into a win against one of these teams. They find a way to lose them. So the whole thing is just, it's like I think a lot of people are just checked out on it. I think that's probably the best way I could say it.
Yeah. And listen, it was 14-7 with 4 minutes left in the second quarter. And on the live watch along, again, I was doing the first half kind of by myself, and I said, I feel like this might get out of hand really quickly. Not because West Virginia was just playing out of their mind, and it was, you saw how UCF was playing. You saw this kind of story. And I said, oh, like, they're going to probably take off the 4 minutes. They're going to go score a touchdown. And then they get the ball to start the second half. And what happened? Exactly that. They went up 28-7. It was another 21-point deficit. that UCF was trying to claw their way back from. This is not TCU. This is week 11 or game 11 in a season that has just been awful. And listen, like I could tell you the stats. Like, we can really go through it. And I mean, Nick, if I told you UCF outgained West Virginia, would you believe me?
I mean, because the best player on the field happened to be number 7. I mean, that's got to be the only reason why.
Yeah, UCF had 348 yards of total offense. West Virginia had 318. Again, what's the story of our season was third down and fourth down. Third down, UCF did a little bit better in the second half. They were 8 of 18, or they stopped. West Virginia was 8 of 18 on third down, which is still awful, which is still really bad. I mean, they had 18 third down chances. On fourth down, though, they were 4 for 4. So that's kind of been the problem. They ran 20 more plays than UCF. They only had 2 penalties to UCF's 8 penalties. I mean, the list goes on and on. I did say they had the ball 15 minutes more than UCF. I did say in the game, or on the beginning part of the live watch line, I said, I feel like whoever gets the turnover, whichever defense gets the turnover is going to win this game. It happened early on UCF's second offensive possession. Dillon risk fumbles. West Virginia gets the ball. They go down and score. So it's just the epitome of the season. It's the epitome of what this team is. And that's why I think everybody's numb. And I don't blame UCF fans for being numb to it. I don't blame UCF fans for checking out. I feel like that's kind of where it's at. I mean, if you look at UCF podcast numbers, fans aren't tuning in as much. You look at Twitter and the conversation on Twitter, barely at all. Like, there was no hype for this game, and it's been like that for a couple weeks now. I think after Arizona, there was a little bit of hype after Arizona because people thought, okay, we got to win. Like, what's the chances? And me and Nick both said, and listen, this team's probably not going to a bowl game. Like, this is not a good enough team for that. But it's getting to the point where the glaring problems and the glaring coaching malpractice, it's becoming too much. And me and Nick could sit here for 30 minutes and talk to you about a game. And what we will, like, we're going to go through some of the box score and we'll tell you highs and lows. But it's like, you all have eyes. We have eyes. We've been seeing the same thing over and over. This season has been Groundhog Day. These podcasts have been Groundhog Day. And we respect you guys too much to just keep doing it. So I don't know how long this pod's going to be, but Nick, it's kind of felt like that. It just felt like Groundhog Day after Groundhog Day, the same thing over and over. This feels just a little bit more worse because UCF really never had a chance in this game, it felt like. It felt like West Virginia from the jump just took it from them, and UCF really never had an answer, whatever they did.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It never felt like they really were in that game. And, you know, I get it. I mean, you're playing on the road, you're playing in weather that you're not used to playing, whatever. I mean, everybody's got to deal with stuff like that. So I don't really put that as an excuse, but, you know, there's passing offense in the first half was pretty much non-existent. It's just too reliant on RJ Harvey to bail you out. And listen, Dillon, we're still in the evaluation of Dillon. And this was clearly the toughest of the games we've seen him play so far. He did have the nice throw to Kobe, but you know, it was more about Kobe on that play, that touchdown where he had a really nice move towards where he faked inside and then went back up and was able to get open, and Dillon threw the ball on time for the touchdown. But you know, it kind of was what it was today from Dillon, to be honest with you. But it was kind of like that for everybody. Defensively, I thought they were a mess for a majority of the night. Some long drives from West Virginia to keep things going, some fourth down conversions. I mean, what? And not just like 4th and 1, 4th and 2, 4th and inches, like 4th and 8, 4th and 9. Like, they had that much confidence in their offense, and it was like that on that final drive when it's 31-21 and West Virginia's trying to bleed clock. It's 4th and 9, and rather than, you know, punt it back to UCF, you know, they call a timeout and come right back out, and Garrett Green runs for 13 yards. I mean, it's par for the course. They just do not make the plays that need to be made in the right moments. I mean, that sounds like a simple statement to make, but it's really what it comes down to. So yeah, like I said, I feel like today was the most discouraging, and now you're not going bowling for the fifth time since 2005 when they joined Conference USA for the first time under Gus, and it sort of highlights what we've been watching here for the last 4 years. It just every year it's trending in the wrong direction. Every year it trends in the wrong direction, and that's again, it's hard not to have those conversations like we've been having, but to me, I'm so focused on what's going to happen after the Utah game.
Yeah, and we'll get to that a little bit towards the end of the pod. I want to get to a couple players. Let's start with Dylan. You kind of mentioned it. This is why I think sometimes fans in general, not just UCF fans, but fans in general, they like to appoint guys quickly. Right? If you get 1 or 2 good games out of a player, fans start to appoint that person as the next guy. And obviously we see it differently. We said with Dylan, he's shown a lot of good things, but we need to wait. We need to see the next 2 games. And I think some fans were like, he's clearly QB1 next year, right? And we're like, we need to hold on. A performance like this shows you why you don't just jump and say he's the next guy. Because you need a body of work. You need a full body of work. And I think Dylan has shown a lot to where you can see improvement, or you can see that there's ways that he can improve and he can potentially be, QB1, right? But moments like tonight, where it was just a struggle. I mean, 11 of 21 for 172 yards and a touchdown. Listen, it wasn't a bad game, but it wasn't good. It wasn't good. There was just a lot of missed passes, he overthrew guys, he underthrew guys. Didn't look like the same moxie that we have seen from Dylan Risk. And not saying he's not going to be UCF's quarterback 1 next season. There's a lot that we don't know moving in. But I think performances like tonight, Nick, kind of show you that there's a lot of work there. There's a lot of things that we don't know. And, it just wasn't a good performance out of Dylan Risk tonight.
And it's not all on him. Like I said, I mean, outside of number 7, who really did show up today? I mean, not many guys. So it's not all on him. He's still in the growth process. We know this, and that's why you live with some of the mistakes and some of the off outings right now. I wish he had more runway throughout this season, but he's only got 1 game left, and I don't know if he's going to be the quarterback next year. I really don't know. And part of that is because there's so much uncertainty with so many other things that don't involve him. So, yeah, we don't know. Like I said, it was, of the games we've seen from Dylan, this was probably the worst one, but it still wasn't like egregiously bad or anything like that. Like I said, he had some big time throws, but overall just not enough. But that goes for everybody. So I wouldn't even single him out honestly at all.
No, I'm just talking quarterback play in general, because I know it's been kind of one of the main talking points of the season with how many quarterbacks have been played. But we'll talk RJ Harvey right now, just really quickly. And again, when we say talk, it's more so just compliment and move on, because I feel like we've said the same thing. It's incredible to watch him. He just does so much. And again, I've said this multiple times. He does so much with nothing. And I genuinely mean that. Half the time you're watching him and there are no holes for him to run through, and he still finds one, even if it's for 2 yards. He makes something out of nothing. Today, 16 carries for 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. He tied the all-time record for UCF touchdowns as a player. If he scores 1 next week, he will break that record. There's not much to say. He's just incredible, and it stinks that in UCF's history, they've had 2 running backs. They've had a bunch of great backs, but there's seasons that are like this where UCF is not good, but they have arguably, for that particular year, one of the best running backs in college football, and clear cut, one of the best running backs to ever wear a UCF jersey. So that's where the sadness comes from, because you feel bad for him that he's having the year that he's having, and yet it's all for nothing, really. Like,
yeah, I hate it. Like I said it on the watch along. I'm very sad that we have one game left of RJ Harvey in a UCF uniform, and I hate it that for these 2 years here that he's gotten a chance to be the undisputed running back one, that they've only been able at this point to muster up 10 wins with it, and that sucks. So, but you're not going to question that guy's toughness. You're not going to question that guy's buy-in in a tough season and circumstance, and that's to be commended for sure. He's going to be, we'll see where he ends up getting picked and all that, but we know he's going to be an NFL caliber player, and that's great. But it just, I wish they had about 5 more guys of his caliber all over the roster. It'd be nice.
Yep. Offense wasn't there. It was probably the worst offensive game since Tim Harris took over calling plays, I would say. Again, you could blame weather. It was cold, but at the end of the day, that's like a really poor excuse for bad offense. The difference between West Virginia's offense and UCF's offense, especially early, was their ability to run the football effectively. RJ Harvey had a couple big runs, but they couldn't sustain it. They couldn't they couldn't ground and pound like West Virginia was doing. Because West Virginia, let me look at Garrett Green's final stats. He was 13 of 21 for 118 yards and a touchdown. Like, he had, what's crazy to say is you can make the argument that, Dillon played better than Green. Green had the 49 rushing yards on 18 attempts, which I don't think is super impressive. But the quarterback play was bad on both sides, but it was the ability to run the football effectively with multiple guys and changing up the running gaps that kind of gave West Virginia the lead early and was able to get them to keep it because UCF's defense couldn't stop the run, whereas West Virginia, stopped it decently.
Yeah, and only two really big long runs that I recall throughout the game. I think there was one from Donaldson and then one from White, but it just sort of was like, it was just constant though. Like when they needed 4, they'd get, they would just keep it moving like that. And I know cause look at the yards per carry. I think it's under 4 actually, but it still amounted to 200 yards. It was enough to continue to keep the chains moving and get enough when they absolutely needed it. So I still feel like that's one of those things where I don't know if the box score tells the entire story there about how UCF stopped the run in this one. And also not to mention, and this is not a shocker at all, UCF had 8 penalties for 58 yards, and West Virginia had 2. So it's unfortunately been a trend, Sean, with the penalties. And Gus talked about that on Monday, I believe, about the penalties, and that did not fix itself for this game. And all that stuff matters. And they also got outpossessed 37-22 in this game. So again, defense on the field for entirely too long.
Yep. X-Ray Alexander, though, Nick, without looking at the stats, I just want you to take a guess. How many tackles do you think X-Ray Alexander had in this game?
17.
Okay, so you looked. All right.
I didn't look. I already knew it.
Oh.
Shame on you for thinking that I didn't prep myself before we hit record.
17 total tackles, 5 solo, but was around the ball a lot. He was a bright spot. He was everywhere.
He's been a bright spot. Bright spot lately.
Dalen Dotson played really well. I think Ricky Barber showed a good amount. Everybody else,
Mac
though,
McWilliams, I thought was good again.
But good is so subjective when you have that kind of
True.
I think the second half was much better. Which is saying something. You only allowed 10 points compared to 21. So I guess that it kind of shows, but the defense early looked like the Addison Williams defense from last year where you couldn't stop the run, couldn't do much. They figured it out a little bit in the second half, but at that point, it's too late. At that point, this is not a team, and Gus said it early, this is not a team that can play from behind and go win like that. It's just not the team to do that, and when the team's playing this bad, you give yourself no chance to win. All right. So I think that's enough West Virginia talk. So here's my thing. Nick, I said before, luckily we get information. We know things. We don't know finality things. I'd be shocked if Gus is the head coach after Utah. You mentioned, listen, we've got one more week of this. We have one more game preview. We have 2 more live streams. And we have one more post-game pod for Utah. I would be shocked if by December, I'd be shocked by December 1st if Gus Malzahn is still the head coach at UCF. From everything we've heard and the way the season's going and the way they're losing, I would be shocked if Gus Malzahn is the head coach by December 1st. Now, that is not anything I know personally. I know information, but I have not heard that Gus Malzahn is not the coach. I have not heard that he's leaving. I've not heard he's staying. I'm just saying, usually what I've said was everything is, what was my terminology? I forgot the word that I use. It's a good word. Everything's on the table, basically. Everything's on the table. I'd be shocked that if he's still the coach at UCF by December 1st. And that kind of opens up a lot of other questions and a lot of headache things that kind of will be in UCF's offseason, Nick. And we talked about a little bit on the live watch along, but if Gus Malzahn is not here, what kind of can of worms does that open up for UCF? And again, we still have one game left, so I want to be very clear on that. But what are the headaches that UCF's going to have to deal with moving forward, I guess, is the good way to put it.
Well, I guess the 2 things would be recruiting, the impacts there. I mean, obviously the recruiting has already fallen off a huge deal, but there was a big recruiting win over the weekend. Well, it was a win already because they had him committed, but he decided to affirm that commitment in Javon Boggs. So I would call that a double win. So you think about him, you think about some of the other guys that are still a part of this class, and maybe some of the other guys that they're still trying to chase. That's one. And then number 2 is probably roster retention. Because obviously if Gus leaves and the coaching staff leaves, like there's going to be players on your roster, and that happens with every team, that are going to enter the transfer portal, and then new coach comes in with new staff and they're going to bring in new players to the portal. So you'll have a roster that might look entirely different next year for all we know. So I think that's sort of some of the ripple effects that it'll cause. And then, of course, we have no idea what this would look like in terms of, is Gus stepping down? Is he retiring? Or if they firing Gus? And that all goes into the monetary part of this whole deal, which has nothing to do with any of us, clearly. But and just in terms of Gus's job, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we genuinely, I feel like throughout this season have tried to steer clear of, or at least earlier in the season, we tried to steer clear whenever people were saying like, "Oh, Gus has got to go," and we were like we were on the side of, well, if you do that, so and so is going to happen, and they don't have the money to do it anyway, and so it's not happening. It's a worthless discussion. But I just feel like losing 7 of 8, I don't think me or you really saw that coming at that time. I don't think we saw that coming. And the performances like today, like I said, I just feel like it was so bad all around. Like, and then you look at where the recruiting has gone to as this season has gone on, it's like, I don't know anymore what are the reasons to keep Gus here. Like, that's where I've just generally come to. I've accepted that. And I feel like a lot of people feel that way. So we'll see what UCF does. We'll see what Gus does. But trust that after that Utah game, we're going to have some sort of finality to all of these questions.
Yeah. And listen, if you're a UCF fan, if you're a Big 12 fan, whatever, and you're tuning in, I would definitely subscribe because
it's going to be fun.
It's going to be something. I mean, even if Gus stays, it's going to be something. I don't know what you're going to get, but it's going to be something. Like, nobody's talking about because you mentioned, right? Player retention. I think one thing that makes me a little nervous, and like I keep saying, we have no idea if Gus is staying or leaving. We have an idea, but we have no idea what the final answer is. You kind of look at Arizona, Nick, right? They lose their head coach. They actually Brendan did a really good job of player retention, keeping their top guys in McMillan and Fafita, when they could have left. And look how that's turned out. So I think the issue that you have with player retention is a lot of players, I think, now are going to start looking at that, where Arizona kept most of their team together thinking, okay, we switched our head coach. And you look at like UCF, right? When you switched Scott Frost and Josh Heupel, that worked out very well. It was a seamless transition with the same players. I think with this UCF roster, if Gus leaves, I think there is going to be a lot of players that, I don't care who you hire, I think there's going to be a good chunk of players that might just want a new change of scenery and might want to leave.
Everywhere.
And I think like a name that I would watch is like EJ Colson. I don't care how much he loves UCF. Like, if all of the coaching staff gets fired and a whole new staff gets brought in.
Right. And that was the part I was going to say. When I kind of tiptoed around it when we were talking about Dylan, when I said that I don't know if he's going to be the quarterback next year because there's so much like uncertainty. And that the part that I was getting at there and how we went into it. So I'll just say what I was meaning. And it's not rocket science. It's just, if there is a new head coach and a new head coaching staff, they're not tied to Dylan Risk. They're not tied to EJ Colson. So usually those guys want to come in and have their own guy. Gus did the same thing with JRP. So that's why when we were talking about Dylan, it's like, I don't know what his future holds. I really don't. And it has to do with the uncertainty of the head coaching position.
And you could say that about every single person on the roster. Like, even guys that you think are going to be starting next year for UCF, you have no idea. And this is if a new head coach comes in. But like, even if Gus stays, I don't think, like, you can't tell me the players on that roster are happy right now. I don't care how much they're getting paid. I don't care how much they love UCF. At the end of the day, they've won 10 games in 2 years. They've lost 17. They're probably going to lose. I mean, they might beat Utah because Utah is just not great. Their defense is really good, and we'll talk about it this week. But like, they might go 10-18 in 2 years. And I'm sorry, but like, or no, that math doesn't work. Whatever the math is, do the math. That's the math. 10-27, I don't know, whatever. That's just not great. That doesn't
whatever the math is, do the math.
Do the math. It doesn't matter. It's not good. 10 wins, I can do that math. But no. And I know we said early, and I wanted to keep, and you alluded to it. I didn't want to talk about coaching. I didn't want to talk about coaching changes or that, because I said that's going to be at minimum a year of us just talking about potential coaching options, and I don't want to do that. It's kind of the point, Nick, where that's all I can really talk about, because it's like, what else am I supposed to talk? What are we supposed to talk about? It's the same bad football we're watching. We're not going to, like, next week is the last UCF game we're going to have for a year. The only thing we have is this coaching potential. And would I be mad if Gus stayed? At this point, yeah, I think so. And I didn't think I would say that a couple weeks ago, because I thought a couple weeks ago,
I'll 1,000% be very underwhelmed by that.
Yeah, because I think it's gotten to the point where there's so many underlying rumors, there's so much speculation, there's so much talking behind the scenes about kind of what's going on behind the scenes. And if you go through all of this just to be like, okay, let's run it back, you lost basically your entire recruiting class. Nick alluded to it. They lost basically a bunch of their recruits. Like, they still have some form of a class, but it's nowhere near what it was. Okay. Are you just going to go into the transfer portal next year? Like, I knew the plan was to play a bunch of young guys, but you need to fill out your roster. So are you going to go in the transfer portal? Okay. And then are we just going to do the same song and dance again? You have easy games on the schedule early. You have to play North Carolina, though. You actually have to play a Power 4 opponent in your first 3 games. Who's to say you're going to win that game? So, like, this is where the problem, and granted, they had Florida this year, so I'm not, I get it. But it's getting to the point, folks, where you have Utah next week, but then things get really interesting. So tune in for Utah. I don't know how we're going to, break it down. We're going to break it down, though. And then we'll do Utah. We're going to enjoy the Utah game, Black Friday. It's going to be cold. It's going to be a nice night. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I hope.
It is going to be beautiful.
Going to be a beautiful night on national television, probably for the last time in a while, so enjoy it. I if I was Fox, I would sell it to the CW at this point. That's probably a better place for it. Enjoy this last game, because folks, we're gonna have we go from 2 episodes to 1 episode usually. I have a feeling we're gonna be doing a couple for a couple weeks after the year, because I think there's gonna be a lot of stuff dropping very quickly. That and again, we'll see. We'll see. Nick, any final thoughts? I don't want to keep rambling.
I don't know. There's nothing else really to say. I think you sat through all 4 hours just about on the stream. I only sat for about 2, but we said a lot there. It's just been again, I'm trying to like throw any other words to it, but it's just been very underwhelming. It's just not been what I expected at all. I feel like this team is so much better than what they have shown, but at the end of the day, 7 of 8 in the loss column is 7 of 8 in the loss column. There's just no other way to put it. So, yeah, I'll see you all on Friday, on Black Friday, while everybody is doing their ridiculous shopping. We'll be in the bounce house.
Yep. We will be posting early this week. We won't post on Thanksgiving. I'm smarter than that. We'll probably post on Tuesday. We usually record on Tuesdays. I'll probably just record and post. So you guys have a couple extra days for your Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll see for your Utah preview. And then we'll figure out. So I know a couple of you guys reached out. Reach out to us. We are more than well open to doing an earlier pregame show at a tailgate spot. I think we kind of want to do that just to show our appreciation, have a lot of fans, because I know we film in the stadium for our pregame show and fans aren't allowed in at that certain time. So if you have tailgate spots, reach out to me and Nick. Our Twitters are down below. So reach out to us, and if you've got a good setup, we'll be more than happy to come bring our pregame show over to you guys and show our appreciation that way. So we appreciate all the support this season, and it's only going to go up from here. But all right, that's it. Don't have anything else really to say. UCF loses 31-21 to West Virginia. They fall to 4-9. No, whoa, I'm just out of it. What is it? 4-7.
4-7.
4-7. 4-7 on the year, and we've got one more game next week against Utah. For Nick Geddes, I'm Sean Green. This has been Charge on Bet Online. We will see you next week.